This is the second small group discussion with J. Krishnamurti in London, 1967.
Who will start it?
May I ask a question? We've talked about meditation many times, but somehow I was wondering if you could go into more the practical side of it, more the actual doing of it, and the sort of things we come up against. And there's something I really don't understand. You see it's automatic, but there's got to be something that sort of jolts you in your life, and then you start suddenly wondering what it's all about. You know, you suddenly see that things are rather incongruous, and you want to find out what it is that's sort of making you go and tick, and how you're functioning. But it's not a thing which comes about automatically. You see, it just comes into being, and that's that. And then you just roll on.
I don't think I said just comes into being. I think it's one of the most difficult things to do, to meditate. But do you want to discuss how to meditate, what is involved in it?
Yes.
The rest also? I don't know. Okay. Do you want to discuss it?
Not really.
Not really, right? Then what?
Since you said meditation is a very important thing, I would like to hear
So
more
won't you
about
come and sit down there, sir? Bring your chair and go and sit in that corner.
It's a hefty, empty chair. I haven't seen it.
Or there, in that corner there. Carry your chair, sir, carry your chair. Otherwise there's no
Just
room.
be careful of the mic.
certainly.
And there's one here, madam. Ah. Oh, there's an empty chair there too, sir.
Maybe if you open the door.
All right. What were you saying, sir?
Well, since you said meditation is such an important thing, I would like to hear more about it. Friends of mine who've come this afternoon, I said that we might be discussing something to do with education.
It's up to you, sir. I mean,
Seems to
this
come to the
this
same-
lady doesn't want to discuss meditation, somebody else wants to discuss meditation. So what shall we discuss?
Have you any views on what the ultimate aims of education should be, seeing that one side of society would clearly like to use brainwashing techniques, and a few object to this, but this could be disastrous economically. I framed it badly, but it's
Yes, I
a
understand,
kick-off.
sir. I'm waiting for... Shall we discuss that or... Lord, let's decide.
Maybe we could vote.
Maybe we could discuss dualism and the mind comparing duality.
I certainly would be interested in hearing you speak about education. Especially what interests me is to distinguish between what you might call education and training, where I feel training implies a conditioning of the person, whereas education is the awakening of some inner directive force or awareness.
Should we do that? Please, you all decide. I don't know what they want.
Yes.
Could you also say something about at what age we should start formal education of children?
I wonder what we mean by education.
Well, we're so often told that children come into the world still connected with God, and it seems important not to break that, yet we've got to prepare them to live in the environment in which they're born, without, one hopes, disturbing them.
I don't know, that's a dangerous supposition, isn't it, really? But so, let's begin, let's leave theories aside, what we're told or what we're not told, but can we find out what we mean by education? Why we are educated at all? Is one educated merely to conform to the pattern of society, to earn a livelihood, to conform to the norm of a social culture? Is that what we call education? Apparently it is, as it is. We are educated to become technicians and disappear into the vast technological field and lead a terribly bourgeois life. Family, children, responsibility and everlasting struggle there afterwards, and so on till one dies. Is that what we call education? And educated for what? To carry on this weariness? This is really quite a serious problem, because both in Asia and in Europe and America, this problem is becoming more and more acute. A great many people are refusing to be so educated. There is a tremendous revolt against the pattern. Of course, we all know that. So, and as the pattern has no answer to them, they take to drugs. You know, all the rest of it follows. So, what do we mean by education? Is there a different way of living, a different way of being educated, a different way of acting in this world? I should have thought the understanding of that would be education. Not just to conform to the pattern which has been established. Whether the communist or the capitalist or the socialist or other forms of political or economic organization.
But surely that is the more superficial form of education.
As it is,
that you're speaking about.
Yeah, as it is, actually.
Because, yes, because surely the education that we really have to consider is the primitive education. That is to say, the education, that the educational process that all children who are born into the world must go through in all societies, and of course all animals also.
That
to
is
distinguish between the education of human beings and the education of animals.
Yes, that is as the gentleman was saying just now, training and education.
Would you call one training and the other education?
And that's what we're trying to find out. What is training and what is education?
Yes.
What is discipline?
But we have the problem of educating to what, they just said. And, could we discuss, what's, what we are here for, what in this world, what is all this show about?
Yes, that's what I mean. What is it all about?
Yeah, and then we can say education.
Yes, what is it all about? Who's going to tell us?
We have got to work it out for ourselves.
And no, but even, I mean, we haven't the time, the energy, the capacity.
But nobody's going to tell us.
No, but am I capable of finding it out for myself?
Yes, surely.
Huh?
Surely.
If I'm capable, which I'm beginning to, but I don't say we are not, if I'm capable, then the problem becomes very simple. If I'm capable, I'll find out what it is all about. Not dependent on society, authority, books and all the rest of it. Then that's a different thing altogether. But even to have that capacity, I must have certain training. Certain pliability of the mind, certain quality of perception, certain discipline. So
you go on to the circle.
yeah, that's just it, you see.
But that's where revelation is very good. I mean, if one believes in prophets, and one believes in breaking this complete
Vicious circle.
Yeah.
Now, how is one to break the vicious circle? I need, as a child, one needs training to have this capacity to find out for oneself what it is all about, the whole of existence. And if you say leave it to the child, good Lord, he'll poor chap, you won't know how to begin. So doesn't then the educator need education in that sense?
Isn't it true that the psychologists recognize that there is a faculty which we call cognition rather than the capacity just to learn by rote? We have also this capacity of, at a glance, as it were, at a glance, seeing or understanding something just like that, or seeing something with a broader view, or bringing a lot of facts together. And we don't understand what this faculty is, but I think it does exist. Can we, education to me would be to cultivate this faculty?
Yes, sir.
Of recognition.
Yes. Yes, but you see, that requires a great deal of,
Yes,
great many things are implied in it.
And a certain amount of training seems to be a prerequisite.
Therefore, what do we mean by training? What do we mean by discipline? Imitation, conformity, suppression. You follow, sir? All those are implied by discipline.
Yes. But as an inward act, it surely means being able to perform a rote training, a ritual or rote, to take one step, 2 steps, right, left, so on.
Yes.
If one must learn to do this first, mustn't one?
Oh yes, sir, surely, obviously it must be.
It doesn't mean one implies it's imitating somebody else, but it's also the capacity to take directions, isn't it? From somebody
Yes,
who says,
yes.
do this, and you do it.
But that gradually leads to a deepening of the conditioning.
Yes, it does.
So how can we, the educator, how can the educator bring about a discipline in codes without conditioning? Without making the mind so definite, precise, and so caught in the whole mechanism of it all.
Isn't it possible to also teach your conditioning with also the well, to begin with, the instruction that it is only temporary, it's to be destroyed. It's like a scaffold for a building. When the building is made, you take the scaffolding down.
But generally the scaffold remains and no building taught.
Isn't that how it's taught?
I know, that's what
it's
I'm...
actually taught to remain as something permanent,
Yes.
not as something to be taken down.
Well, we could take the quantitative aspects of education and could teach them or have training in them. But the qualitative aspects, that would be where we would have to, where it wouldn't be teaching, but it would be the flowering of individuals' own minds, their own critical appraisals. Their own. So dividing up the education into qualitative and quantitative aspects, and teaching just the qualitative, and not the qualitative.
Quite.
But isn't perhaps the aim twofold? We have to put certain details into the mind which have to be used subsequently in the trade which the children will do afterwards. And at the same time we have to teach them that not to be caught up in these details.
But all that depends, don't you think, what life is all about. Unless we settle that first, whether it do training, quantitative, qualitative, and so on can go on indefinitely. But unless we are clear, the professional teacher is clear what life is all about, how can you divide and train and, say this is right, this is wrong, this must be and that must not be. Surely the first function is obviously to find out if one can perceive the total purpose of all existence. What is it all about, as you first said? Unless we are clear about that, I don't see what education is for. I know several instances, professional PhDs and girls who have been to university, taken their highest degrees, just disappear in the world, get married, and that's the end of it, finished. What? Everyone says, what for? What is it all about? So the Catholics say, it's all about saving your soul. The Jesus mythology and the communist mythology. So they said this is what is life meant to be. And they train them according to that. And the training is so good, you can't escape from it afterwards. So shouldn't we, before we discuss what kind of training and all the rest of it, find out what life is all about, where it's all going to?
Surely since the beginning, we've all been born and woken up into a world which is already a going concern. Even the first Adam woke up into a world. He didn't have to start anything. We went in at the beginning.
Quite.
It was in the beginning. It's already been going when we become aware. And it's like just as if you woke up in a crowd and you streamed along with the people.
Yes, sir, I understand that.
That doesn't change our predicament or what we have to find out.
But we start doing things.
Yes, but now we say let's stop doing things and find out what we are going to do.
But why?
Because the world is misery. I'm living in there's such poverty, such misery. I said, what for all this? It's a going concern, but it's a rotten concern.
Yes, one can't drop out.
I don't. It's not a question of dropping out.
Well, there are people who live on the edge of Sahara. Sahara, expand, and they just sit there and they wither away. People do drop out. Societies drop out.
It's one of the solutions which can take, but it's not one which certainly I feel.
Yes, but at the same time, there's no point in just carrying on this old institution, which is just a dead horse which we're dragging around.
Yeah.
And you know, if we call ourselves teachers, it's up to, you know, I mean, this is our position.
But we've already made our contracts with the moving crowd by the
But I don't want to break it.
Unconditionally. We repudiate those. The moving crowd and their contracts.
Yes.
And their values, their structures.
This is a bit of a chicken and an egg argument, isn't it?
I-
Because
not
a
really.
child has got to be educated
that's-
before it can start having these awful doubts.
So I say, we're asking, before we train the child, which we have to, shouldn't we try to find out, not as dropouts, sorry,
Right.
whether in India or in Sahara or in America, find out what it is all about.
But is it possible to separate the work that one's doing from the purpose of life? I mean, aren't they really interrelated?
They are related, but first shouldn't we start with that, sir?
Yes,
Is the
but don't
purpose
you-
of life just to go and become a factory worker or a professor in university?
But don't you find out through doing things? I mean, you don't find out in a vacuum.
No, you don't. But first, we're talking about the child who is almost in a vacuum. And we're going to help him. We're going to train him. Train him for what? Discipline for what purpose?
And how can we who are so confused train?
That's the whole point. What is it all about? That's what we're saying. Unless we know how to, what it means, what's the good of... I can't see it.
Well, what about starting to find out something about the child first of all?
Or ourselves.
Let's study the child,
Or ourselves.
as well as ourselves, of course.
But how can we understand a child without first understanding ourselves?
Well, there's a great deal you can understand about all sorts of things. By looking, by being aware, by observing, patient observation, I would say.
But with what are we understanding? Are we understanding with some mechanism which is out of our control, which we haven't really understood?
Well, I think I should say that understanding is very difficult. Observation, however, is something that most people, I would think, are capable of. I think understanding is extremely difficult, but I think one's got to observe before you can understand.
So when we observe, there are lots of problems which come into that.
That you don't know what they mean.
Well, you try to observe, but then we're stuck with this sort of mechanism which is out of our control, and we find that we're not really able to observe a thing, but that this mechanism keeps on turning around, and our thoughts keep on turning around, and we try to observe something outward again, but there seems to be something which is in a big thick piece of glass which is preventing us looking at something else. And so we have to try and take this piece of glass away before we can look outward.
So when we say we observe the child, as you're saying, observe the child, we observe the child, and we help him, train him a little bit. And as he grows up, he's going to ask one of these days, because he sees his mother and his father and all the rest of society, they're in confusion, they're in conflict. They say, so what is it all about? There's divorce. My father lives somewhere else, my mother somewhere else. There is God, somebody says no. Please, before you make a monkey of me, tell me all about it. So shouldn't we, sir, I don't know, I'm just suggesting, discuss not how to train, which is fairly comparatively easy, but the training to what? To what purpose? To what end? Just to pass exams, get a degree and slip into the routine? to learn the routine, know the ways of it, and also perhaps at the same time find out what life is about.
Could you train to be uncomfortable? Which is, I mean, if you are going to train people to have these thoughts and to worry them through and not be a comfortable bus driver or university professor, this is going to be very uncomfortable.
Very.
So shouldn't we literally train them to take that kind of knock, which is rather a
But
different sort of knock?
that's part of it.
That's part of it.
Part of it.
So you do have to alter the way you train.
That's what. Therefore, we must find out where is the direction.
To be uncomfortable.
Life is dreadfully uncomfortable. So anyhow, poor fellows, we don't have to teach them.
But we can't swing to the other extreme of saying that we should try to make life comfortable and happy and beautiful.
That doesn't exist. You know, so what happens in the East, you know pretty well how uncomfortable the whole existence of life is there. My God. I mean, this problem is really quite immense because the society wants the child to be comfortable in his slavery, if you can quote, conform, not to be discontent. Because a discontented child or a youth or a man is a danger. As is happening in Russia, you know, of course. And so on, so on. So that's why I feel it's tremendously important to find out what we are training the child for before we train him.
But don't we have to find out what the capacities of the child are before we attempt to train at all? It's this word training that frightens me.
Yeah, as soon as I
terrified
believe.
of the word training
I know.
as applied to children. Because in the limited experience that I've had of these things, I would say that training is the very last thing that
I quite agree, sir.
in attempting to do.
I agree, but we started by saying we need a certain discipline.
But surely the discipline that one needs is something that develops out of the conditions of life, or should develop out of the conditions of life. It should develop in the family circle. It should develop in the group. It should. There is a certain discipline in the group, inevitable discipline in the group, and I would say that the person who finds themselves in the unfortunate and unenviable position of authority or trying to direct the group in any way, that the main task is to ensure that discipline is not incorrectly applied, that people are not unfairly treated, that they're not ill-used in different ways, so that they do have the opportunity to develop and show what they've got there, rather than to impose something on them.
But do we understand our subjects first? I think a lot of us have been brought up and had our university training and sort of chosen our subject, a subject which we found very interesting and fascinating at the time, without really realising the perniciousness of our subject. It might be different parts of the science of the arts itself. And so we also have to have an understanding of our subject and its real meaning.
Well, of course, I wasn't thinking of subjects. I was thinking of tying your shoes and blowing your nose. I hadn't got around to thinking of subjects. I think by the time you've worked through the other things, it's time to start thinking of subjects.
But your attitude seemed neutral and non-negative attitude. Your attitude seemed a neutral one, that of keeping the status quo and not letting one person bully another, so that people can develop on themselves, by themselves, rather than having a positive direction to the group behavior?
Well, I would say that the positive direction is something that emerges in a most positive way.
By the group itself, not by the leader, right?
Oh, certainly by the group itself.
And this is what what I'm thinking here is that we ourselves, the group leader, has to know, should know, or would be preferably if he knew what direction he is going in. What he thinks life is about. What the direction should be. And that, I think, is much more important a question than the group developing by itself into a fairly cohesive group or otherwise, which is of secondary importance.
Well, of course, this may be true, but for my own part, I found that the group teaches me rather than me teaching the group. For my part, this seems to be how it has to be.
Could I take one point that you made about children learning to tie laces, which is obviously a very big manipulative jump. Yet, I reckon, to go back to the lady's point about subjects, you could angle this so that it didn't just become tying a lace, it became an aspect of part of English. Maybe they're going to have to describe this. It could be a part of mathematics, a part of topology. It could be a part of art, the patterns, why not bows, and so on. So one mustn't kid oneself that really the group is leading it. The really good teacher knows there are these underlying structures beneath something as boring as tying your laces. So here we've cottoned on, pardon, not intended, cottoned on to something about tying laces that an educator can bring in, where a child left to its own devices, even copying Big Brother, I mean it's Bigger Brother, wouldn't pick up. Is this a kind of lead-in now, or what we're after?
But isn't the educator, doesn't he have a much larger task through the responsibility of just having intercourse with other people and people who look up to him, so that it's not just putting over the subject and showing sort of the structures and things which have something to do with their subject, but it's a much larger psychological task as well. And isn't this really the very important thing? Because if people are going to just learn from their little textbooks and things like that, they're going to be, the educator won't have done anything at all for the children. He'll have just turned them out into society, ready for society. But the task is much, much larger. It's much larger than just the subject.
Could you, this other aspect that you're talking about, could you impart that without the stuff that society wants?
This is the problem.
Or does it have to be embedded in shoelaces and writing presses and what have you? I suspect we think it is embedded in this, but maybe it could be taught, imparted separately.
Well, so, how would you, if you have a son, I hope you have, if you have a family, what do you want them to be? Not want them to be uniform. I mean, what do you want to do with that material you have?
Speaking personally, I would have thought, I can say that it's a selfish one. I'm purely enjoying a two-way...
But that's only part of existence.
Yes.
But as they grow up, what do you want them to be? What do you envisage them to be or to become, what their life and so on? What is it a parent wants?
I think this depends awfully on the parent.
No, I'm taking, of course, I'm saying an educated, intelligent, liberal, free, a parent who has good relation with the children and taking all that for granted. Not a broken up family, I'm not talking that. What would such a parent want?
Want them to be happy, unfortunately.
Just happy?
No, certainly not. Basically, you want them to stay alive.
So that's one problem. Yeah, basically you want. No, you want them to be alive. You want them to stay alive. No, yes.
Survival, yeah.
Survival. That's one point. You want them what? What then?
Fulfilled or something.
No.
No, not necessarily. You want them to have a. Survival implies a job.
That's a society.
Society, which is a job.
Some
Then-
degree of independence.
Yes, but sir, if you are preparing the child for a job, he's going to lose his independence because that becomes the primary thing.
Not really, sir. Not to some measure. To some measure.
A man that has to earn a livelihood from morning till night for the next 40 years, he's, to some measure, he's liberal, he's free, but to 99% he's stuck.
Right. But the small measure is very precious
Oh,
and has to be
of
preserved.
course, it's like a man in the prison who says, there's the yard, at least I can walk in that yard. And that's not. So, there's survival aspect of it. Then, what else? What do I want my child to be? I'm fairly sane being. You know, I'm not divorced my wife or we're quarreled with each other. It's a fairly good family unit. And what do I want him to be, apart from survival? To be happy?
I want him to ask what life's about.
Huh?
I want him to ask what life's about.
I want him to have intelligence, to question everything. No?
Well, it's more than intelligence. No?
And I'm putting it quickly.
This vitality that he should have his own centre of gravity and look out from it, it doesn't mean that because he's going to work for 40 years in a particular job, if this vitality is enough, it doesn't matter what he does because he's free.
So, but I mean, just think of it, going every morning, don't you know this?
Yes.
To have vitality, apart from that,
yes.
It requires, So the moment we assert and demand that he survive, we're already committing him to survive in a particular pattern. And he'll never be a dropout. He'll never say, question, damned question. So he'll always have this survival demand and fear with it. And so, moment there is fear, you want to escape from it, drink, all the rest of it begins. So, then what? We want him to survive, obviously, we don't want to help him to commit suicide. And what? So, do we emphasize freedom first and survival after, or survival first and freedom? Freedom being intelligence. Now, great many things involved in freedom. Which is the first thing you demand of a child? That he survive? My God, if you demand freedom, then you have to help him to be free. Either adopting the Socratic method of teaching, all the rest of it. From the beginning, help him to understand authority, the whole business of it. And that if that is established, he will survive. Whether not in the way you want him to survive, but he will survive. But if you insist survival is the first thing, then we're lost. Then we do create a marvelous, bourgeois, repetitive society in which there'll be no dropouts. That's what's happening, sir.
So one starts with this, we still haven't got what life is about yet, but we're going to...
I think we're coming to it, you see. Is life meant to be at any price survival? Or is life meant to be something of such immense significance which demands freedom first? Freedom which brings its own discipline, its own intelligence, its own quality of perception, and so on, so on, so on.
We get to rather an interesting point of saying survival so that we can be free afterwards.
I don't, that's a good old trick.
And do you think we're talking in terms of a number of individuals or of, say, mankind, man?
Man, we are talking about man, not individuals.
Yes.
The individual is a local entity.
Because if you think of man, the notion of survival, surely the survival of man is not a question of consciousness for an ordinary consciousness or thought. I mean, normal people think in terms of their own survival, those of their children, but when you get within, more than 10 miles away, you're not thinking of anybody's survival beyond a
quite
radius.
We're talking
and yet
about...
we're talking about man.
Man, sir,
and
yes, surely.
The freedom of man, and yet I feel a lot of the conversations have been in terms of individuals. What should we do with this child?
No, I'm talking of man, not individual.
Well, that clarifies it to me
because individual is local entity. Man is universal. Man is in India, in America, Russia, or wherever it is. The individual is conditioned by the local state. The local culture, local affair, the pub, you following all that thing. But man is much more than the individual. And in the man is the individual, not, I don't know.
Because the individual is the man which is caught up in the conditioning of things.
No, but you see, do I look at myself as an individual or as a human being?
Yes, this is the problem.
As I'm putting it, am I a human being or an individual? Because when I observe, I see I'm also the Chinese, the Indian, the European, the American. I am a human being. But when I find myself in a local country, in a local village, and I have no vision of this whole man, I'm just an individual there. I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
Yes. And I find my individuality limits me to a great extent.
But the individuality is such a small affair.
So how can we go beyond it?
That's...
This is one of the first steps in education.
Yes, sir. We are doing it now.
Individual to the human being.
Yes. So, what do we demand of the human being? As a human being, what do you demand of yourself? What do you... and then your children. They are human beings, not you are particular little brats. And what do we, as a parent, expect of them? Or rather, help them to become, to grow, to evolve. So unless the educator is him, in himself, educated in the sense we're talking about, he'll endlessly go around chasing his own tail. So the religious people say it's all about the living a life with God. You follow? I'm using that very briefly and quickly. That is, there is God who knows what is right and wrong. You must do this, you must not do that, and so on, so on, so on. And if you are not religious, if you are a communist, you say, the state. You know all that business. The Commissar, the Politburo, the Big Brother, the Marx and nobody else, and so on. And if you accept neither, then what? You don't become merely a capitalist that's accumulating a lot of money. That's not the whole purpose of life. So you say, what is it all about? What am I as a human being living in this business, in this world? What is it? What am I? What do I, as a human being, I'm looking for? Somebody suggested happiness. Is that the total end of my life, happiness?
No, he says that's what you want for your children.
I mean, even my children, my child may want total is to go to the pub every night, or worship in a church, because he feels that in that way a marvelous escape. No, I think this is much larger issue than what we are. So.
Jody, rather than, I feel I can't think in terms of the meaning of things so much as the way man will go, quite inevitably, will depend on the faculties which he has. And it's useless to try and awaken faculties that don't exist, such as, I can mention any fantastic faculty. But returning to education, in my terms, it is to rather, as the gentleman over there said, to give opportunities to the child. And I think the specific opportunities you give it are the awakening of its faculties. And I think most of what we call unhappiness and frustration in educated people is that rather than having their faculties awoken, they've been grooved along a certain very narrow paths.
Right.
But 9/10 of their faculties are still nascent, uncrystallized in any sort of way. And this, the awakening of these faculties and giving way to them, they call freedom, you see. They want freedom to have the full range of their experience, which education doesn't give them. It takes one narrow, socially acceptable or beneficial little group of faculties, such as being able to read or write or do arithmetic and memorize. Just a very narrow range, and they've left out
the whole of
the whole of the rest. But it basically depends not on understanding what life is about, but on understanding what faculties we have, because on that the whole thing depends. You can't invent a meaning if there isn't a faculty which allows you to grasp that meaning.
Can one develop this faculty or many faculties through education? Education, the accepted sense of the word.
Well, that's the big question I came here with.
Yes,
is it
yes.
possible? This is
I mean, that's what we're all asking.
I think you see in, excuse me, just if I might, you see in science fiction a lot of fantastic faculties. You're inventing faculties. And of course, as soon as you invent faculties, you create new universes.
Universe, quite.
So it's finally the faculties that count.
But you can only find out new faculties by the present faculties that you already have.
I wouldn't have said that. I think this is where education is so stereotyped. By working with the faculties we know we have, we actually exclude the ones we might have. And I think this is what
So that comes down to something which is,
yes.
do the teacher, the educator, deal with a small group of children, 5, 10, 12, which means, tremendous concern of over every child, watching over every child. Not only the one teacher who wants to, but the whole staff. And is the whole staff capable of doing this? See, there's a school in India, we've been trying this. We can't get educators. We have one or two who try this, but the rest smothered the whole thing. So it requires a whole group of teachers who are really dedicated, not just, out for their bread and butter and their family and all that rubbish, but actually dedicated to this thing. To study each child, to go, the whole thing involved in it. Which means make the child feel completely at home in the school. Because at home he is not cared for in this way. The parents haven't that time in the motto. So it means that the moment this child comes to the school, he is completely at home. I don't know, you follow what?
Yes, indeed. And don't you think to a certain extent we've achieved this up to a certain age, the kindergarten age? But it's when we get into the...
Of course, we mean right through.
Yes, exactly. But we get it up to a certain age.
No, I know that, but that certain age is not good enough. It has to be carried right from that kindergarten age till he goes to university.
Well, yes. Isn't it at this particular age where we go wrong, certain faculties are beginning to be...
Thwarted. I guess, yes. Thwarted, twisted, and all the rest of it.
Yes.
So, are there such a group of teachers? You follow, sir? That's the whole point. Who say, look, we are going to take each child as a human being, study him, help him, all that business, and the whole school is dedicated for that purpose. The whole school, not one or two teachers.
For this one child?
With the child, not with one child, with the child.
Well, this certainly can't happen just like that.
I know, for goodness sake.
And will it take generations even to
Maybe,
do that?
maybe. Will there be people who will be the dropouts to enter into this kind of school?
As the teachers, you mean?
As teachers,
yes,
of course.
Yeah. I think you've got to be willing to be a maverick or
And then such teachers can ask, what is it all about? You follow, sir?
Yes.
Then they will, by discussing, by talking together, they'll begin to find out. But to sit here theoretically discuss what it is all about remains a theoretical issue.
It will remain forever, wouldn't it?
Sir?
It will forever remain.
Yeah, obviously.
So, whether it's here or in the classroom, it's the same thing.
But sir, do I ask myself, as a human being, forgetting what teacher and educator and all the rest of it, what do I say, what is it all about? What am I living for? Just to have few sensations, sexual or otherwise, just to have some coins in your pocket, and to be able to travel about here and there, or what? So that's why I feel this question is not, has to be gone into very, very deeply, not just casually like this.
Could I go back to the point that was brought up by the lady over there about the degree subject, whatever it may be, subject, and then I may be misreading, but I got the impression that having achieved this pinnacle, whatever it is called, PhD or something, then maybe one doesn't think quite so much about this subject. Yes. This was the impression I got. And yet this is offered as a very viable kind of a drug, is it not?
Very.
And are you saying then we've got to be? It's much worse than that.
Much
because we
worse,
can't just
worse.
accept that as
Yes.
Have we time to really go into this?
So, look, sir, in India, I'm thinking, for every job, there are at least 3,000 to 4,000 people. You want a cook, MA comes to offer to cook for you. MA who's been through, you follow, the rigmarole, and can't get a job because there are 3,000 people for that job, and you advertise for a cook, and a MA or a BA or somebody turns up to help you to cook. Just think of it, sir. And this is going to happen right to the world with this explosion of population and all the rest of it.
But paradoxically, isn't he a little happier if he's got to struggle for his livelihood?
Do you know what happened to a boy I know? He struggled and he had to support his family, you know, in India things are different, and he couldn't do it, so he committed suicide. It may be very good to struggle, but he ends up under the bus.
So he wasn't putting survival first.
No.
No.
But survival became the factor.
It's a necessary condition,
yes.
but not sufficient.
No. So as a grown-up human being, do I ask myself what it's all about? And who am I going to ask? The Catholic, he'll immediately have an answer for you. The communist has an answer. So does everybody who says, this is the thing to do. And if you reject all that, obviously being absurd, so you're left to yourself. And how do you answer yourself? Has one the capacity to find out for oneself what it is all about?
It seems that fragmented answers come to us.
Exactly.
Which you hang on to.
So is there an answer which is not fragmentary? Because we are, unfortunately, fragmented human beings.
Do you envisage people being whole at some point?
Beg pardon?
Do you envisage people not being fragmentary at some point in history?
I don't envisage anything, but is it, one is, a human being is fragmented.
And you see, I mean, I'm just very pessimistic of ourselves and the future of mankind. In the historical perspective, that people have been asking these questions, people have been unhappy, there have been wars throughout, and they will continue to be so. I mean,
So then, do I give up?
Yeah, exactly. I'm saying
For God's sake, I don't want to give up.
I'm saying I'm very pessimistic.
You may be because you...
but I'm pessimistic, but I'm not going to give up.
That's all right then.
Yeah, but this is.
I understand that very well. If you don't give up, then what do you do?
This is what I'm trying to
figure out. Yeah, exactly.
Do you think people really don't want it enough to change?
What?
People really don't want enough to change or to be aware. They just don't want it enough. They like to stay as they are.
Of course.
So I think that's only, if I may say, from my knowledge of education, because all waking it up that we learnt at school was a kind of jolt which was given one where one's attention was wandering, and one's highly conditioned to what being woken up is,
yes,
as a part of this very disagreeable way of educating, you see. Instead of waking up being an enlightenment, it's actually a physiological shock,
quite so.
which is the very reverse.
Yes,
but you're conditioned into that at school, a rap on the knuckles,
I know.
debating and so on. And so I'm not surprised that in later life, where some prophet comes along and says, now, wake up, it goes back to the school boy, somebody's going to rap me on the knuckles.
No, quite.
So that we're conditioned against it. Not because I think we're really averse to it, if we could get the flavor of it.
But it's also the fact that when we are confronted with a brief instant of waking up, we're so frightened by the impact that we immediately switch back into our habitual sort of pushing away of the thing.
Is it? Yeah.
And one wonders whether it's possible to break through it
Of course.
forever. And that brings us back to the question of, does it become is it possible to break through it forever, completely?
Yes, I think so. That's what we discussed. In all these talks, I think it is possible to break away totally from all this.
But it takes an awful lot of energy to try and watch things all the time. And
I don't think you need energy, but not all the time. After all, when you see a precipice, you have understood its danger, and therefore you never go near it. I don't know if I'm con-
Yes.
I think we don't see sufficiently clearly the dangers, the poisonous states.
Yes.
And so we go on playing with them. But the moment you see something is really poisonous, you drop it.
Yes. So it's a question. So the complete breakthrough can only come then when we've really been watching. So
Yes,
until
obviously,
the impact of the poison has become so large that we just do drop it. But until then, there is always this
Of
question
course.
of
Therefore it arises, why don't you see it? Why doesn't one see it?
You don't want to.
There is one also, not only one doesn't want to, but also one may not have the capacity. Or our own minds refuses to see, you follow, we have our own resistances, our own inclinations, tendencies, which prevent us from seeing.
But it does happen sometimes that one sees and drops it, but then it comes back.
No, and then you don't see it. And do you do that when you see a dangerous animal?
But then the danger subsides, and then...
No. Once you see a danger, does it revive? Once you see the danger of taking poison from a bottle, you never touch that bottle.
Yes.
In the same way, can't one see the dangers, the pitfalls of one's own, all the rest of it. I don't want to go into details of it. Can't one see it? And apparently one doesn't. And therefore one goes back to it.
Yes. So how is it...
That's of course. That requires, first, as you said, energy.
Yes.
Then you have to watch, as was suggested at the beginning. You have to watch it, be aware of what actually is taking place.
Yes. Now, you did describe a time of meditation, and to do that, one has to sort of stop it. And
you see now, what we are doing now is part of meditation, isn't it, really? Because we are trying to find out how to break through, how to see a poisonous thing as poisonous and really drop it.
Yes.
We can't drop it as long as the mind is refusing to acknowledge it's poisonous.
Yes.
And so mind has to investigate itself why it refuses to see something which is deadly. Because it's afraid of the consequences, afraid of change, afraid God knows what's going to happen after.
Yes.
So it said, let me play with it.
So, how are we to tackle it?
The one?
How would you tackle it? Because this is what... I mean, this is what's happening all the time.
This is, I know. So, one has to investigate, one has to go into it. That means energy. Are you willing to go into it? Or is the attraction to the poison so great that you say, well, I'll take a little, and then when it suits me, I'll examine. So that's why you say, what is the primary importance? What is it all about? Just to enjoy ourselves? Not that enjoyment is excluded.
Do you think that education, as we understand, helps to look at poison bottles, or does it help to see them as nice bottles?
Yes, that's just it.
Yes.
I'm afraid it helps us see the nice bottles. Because look, we've had so many wars. Nobody has said no more war. In India, sir, when there was that war between Pakistan and India, they had been preaching, Gandhi company, for years, no non-violence. And not one person, sir, I'm telling you the fact, not one person in India stood up against it. Including all the disciples, all the leaders of Gandhism, non-violence were practiced for 40 years. You follow?
Mm.
Mm.
Do you think one can teach cooperation and responsibility? Because if it's mankind that we're concerned with, can one instill a sense of...
Madam, why does this question of responsibility arise? I am responsible, I love people. I love people. Then why I am responsible? I feel tremendously responsible for you as a human being. You follow what I mean? Because I as a human being, I love human beings. Therefore I am responsible. But if I say, can I teach responsibility, then it becomes a duty, it becomes a nightmare.
But if one's going to have these schools where children have so much attention, is it going to be at the expense? I mean, it seems so many things are have their opposites always. There's a certain amount of good in one place, there's
I know.
bad in the other.
Of course, of course. See, responsibility and duty go together.
Yes.
And those two words are frightening. Duty to my country. You know, duty to my family, duty, responsibility for my children, responsibility for my wife. You follow? This whole thing becomes such a deadly affair.
Yes, but I still feel that as a child could see that it was being taught by imperfect teachers and feel the sense of how things are.
Oh, so my relationship with the student would be based on this explanation. Look here, boy, I am imperfect. You understand what I mean? I'm not your guru, your teacher and all this. Here we are, both of us are learning. Both of us are trying to find out.
Yes.
And therefore, our relationship with the child is entirely different then.
Do you think it would be ever possible for followers of various sects, I don't mean necessarily religious, they could be scientific or anything, to conjoin together? I mean, this, quite apart from the big question of war, is a very big one. And to get two relatively intelligent and intellectual people meeting, although they belong on opposite sides of the camp.
I'm afraid it's rather difficult, isn't it?
Yes. Would this not be a valid sort of immediate aim in education to achieve? It doesn't go very deep.
Very deep, no. So we've tried this, inviting various professors and teachers to the school. One says war is necessary, the other says not necessary. Mm-hmm. One says you must be a businessman, the other says family is the most important thing in life. Mm-hmm. So at the end of it, the poor child says, for God's sake, sir, what is it all about? Every professional says different thing. I'm lost, which is actually takes place. The more clever the professional, the more, you know. Mm. So one tells them, listen to them all, question them, don't accept. You follow?
Yes.
All the rest of it.
Do the children show any, who've been through this process, any greater ability to...
No. There's the pressures of their parents at home. Society is so tremendous. Poor chaps. Some of them don't want to go home. They say, for God's sake, sir, let's remain here. I don't care if I dig ditch or this or that. I don't want to go out. That kind of thing can't continue. And also we've tried in this school, which has existed for 40 years, say no authority, no class. Do you know what they did? You can imagine. Up every tree, actual monkeys they were. And so we had.
It seems with everything taught, there's got to be the antidote in itself.
Yes, and a man who teaches because he has to survive, then you'll follow. He's the lower, you know what it is.
You said these kids were actual monkeys. How was the academic work?
Huh?
How was the academic work?
None at all. What did I say? They said 3 years, no school, no class, no, we're all free, no authority.
Then what happened?
Then what happened?
Are they still monkeys or they...
No, we all got together, said this got to stop, for heaven's sake, because the parents began to grumble. So then we went to the whole question of authority and discussed it and reform.
Didn't they get bored? I mean, didn't they want...
Oh yes, some of them got bored.
They found other trees.
Some of them got terribly bored and came to the class out of boredom.
That's what I meant.
Of course,
you found them coming to class, yes.
Oh, so you know the whole thing. Isn't it time to stop now?
25 plus 5.